Well, welcome everybody to another iteration of our Fireside chat series for Alpha Tribe. We're welcomed here today with Scott Turner. Welcome, Scott. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, man.
We'll get into your full background and everything as we dive into the interview. But I've known Scott for many years now. Did not know him in the Marine Corps, but he was a good friend of one of my good friends, and we met that way as we were both kind of getting out. So became close friends. After that, was my neighbor in New York when I lived there, lived around the block from me. So we had a lot of good times there. So Scott's got a ton of very wild roller coaster story from his early days Marine Corps all the way through raising money as a co-founder of a startup. And we're going to get into all that today. So excited to talk to you today, Scott.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Super honored. And just stoked to be here. So Let's do it.
Well, let's dive in. So maybe we'll just start. Do you want to just give like a quick kind of high level overview of like your background from the military through what you're doing now, and then we'll kind of dive into kind of deep dive each section?
Yeah, definitely. So, I served in the Marine Corps as an enlisted comms guy. I was a data guy from 2012 to 16. Got out and then started working for Peloton. Was there for about 5 years. Left the company at the beginning of 2021. Then I worked for a B2B VR company doing like sales engineering and program management. And then my third company was Hatch, which is a consumer electronics sleep company. If you have kids, you probably have one. Worked there for a couple of years. And then I started my own company, which is Misery and Mayhem, 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago. And we're actually working through a rebrand right now, which I was telling Sebastian about earlier, but I'll kind of go over some of that stuff too and some of the lessons learned. But yeah, that's kind of a gist of it. I mean, I have an engineering background, and then I kind of moved more into, strategic and technical program management, not to get all wordy about it, but that's, basically what I was doing. So yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate the intro, Scott. All right. So let's start at my favorite part of your personal story, your early days. Tell us. So I guess I know the answer to this, but I'll frame a question for everybody else. Was it your intention at first to just enlist in the Marine Corps? Was that your plan?
Yeah, not exactly. I mean, like most people who end up joining, or a lot of people end up joining, I was like, I want to join the Marine Corps. The way that I was between the Army and the Marine Corps for like, most of high school or whatever. And then one night, my senior year of high school, I was like pretty drunk at an In-N-Out burger. And this is like the most hilarious thing. There's these two dudes standing in the line, and they have like, now I'm like, now it's funny to me looking back on it. But at the time, they have like the tracksuit tops on, and they have like high and tights. And I'm like pretty intoxicated. And I go up and I'm like, hey, like, are you in the Marines or whatever? And they're like, yeah, we just graduated boot camp. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, and I'm like, I'm between joining the Army and the Marine Corps. And they're like, you got to join the Marine Corps. And then that was how I made my decision, which was kind of funny. But I ended up going to University of Colorado Boulder, and I enrolled in the NROTC program there. And that's where I met like some of our mutual friends and stuff like that. And definitely wasn't mature enough for that at all. Like I remember just kind of being like, man, I don't want to get up and do all those PT, like, like I got to Boulder. I'm like, dude, I want to party. Like, what am I doing in this like ROTC thing? And I was like, and I don't really want to go to school either that much. So I ended up getting my degree very quickly in partying at Boulder, which is pretty easy to do. I ended up getting put on academic probation very quickly. DOR'd out of the NROTC program after the first semester and kind of became like one of those Boulder kids that you hear about that doesn't make it through their second semester. And my parents financially lowered the boom. They were like, we're not supporting this lifestyle. Like, you're going to have to figure it out. And all of a sudden I'm like, not in school. I'm not employed. I don't have any money. And I'm just kind of like, okay, shit. Like, this didn't go as I planned, kind of. And I went down to the recruiting office and I was just like, hey man, you don't even need to sell me on any of this stuff. Like
just
you
sign.
know, they're pulling out all the you know, the tiles and the whatever, and they're like, hey, what do you want? I'm like, dude, I was like, I don't care what my job is. I don't care about just get me out of here, because I'm like, I gotta leave. Like, my parents are like freaking out. Like, my life is not in a good place. So my recruiter was a cool dude, totally honest with me. It was like, he was like, well, if you want to leave here the fastest, I can give you either like motor T, MP, or comms. And I was like, I don't know what any of those are. But then he was like, you did pretty good on your tests, so let's do comms. I was like, cool. And of course, like Marine Corps recruiting station, there's like one comms guy who's a recruiter, and he's like, yeah, you're like, he basically explains like the job of a JTAC or like a like very senior Anglico, like FO, and is like, yeah, that's what
He does that.
yeah, he's like, that's what comms is. I'm like, sick, whatever. And I don't want to talk like I cared about being in some super combat forward role, because I didn't. So I was just kind of like, cool, whatever. You could have told me I was going to be, you know, an electrician. I would have been fine with it. So anyway, yeah, that's how I ended up enlisting. Kind of a circumstantial thing, and I always wanted to do it. So it was kind of like in the back of my head as I was making all these terrible kind of decisions or irresponsible decisions at the time. I was like, well, like,
that's the backup plan.
I could always just enlist in the Marine Corps, and then very quickly I was like, wow, that kind of happened quick. So, you know, when I was 19 is when I went in. So
yeah, one of our mutual friends that I went to business school with was your roommate freshman year, and his perspective of the story is makes me laugh. Where I think he'll say he was like, got sent away for a semester, like a travel abroad for RTC basically, and he had no clue that you had like basically dropped out and just went all in on partying. He's like,
yeah.
you came back to your apartment, opened the door, and you were like ripping a bong in the living room.
Yeah. He was like, dude, don't you have finals? He literally said, the first thing he said is, Turner, how are we going to party tonight? You have finals this week. I'm like, dude, I haven't had finals since last year. And then I was like, hey, I also enlisted. And he's like, no, you didn't. I'm like, dude, here's the fucking paperwork, man. Like, yeah, like I'm leaving in like 3 weeks.
He was like, all right, whatever, just clean up the drugs off the table because my parents are coming over right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So cool. So now that we know kind of like how you got into the Marine Corps, right? Obviously, like the community here is, we want to focus more of the conversation on your transition. So maybe kind of breezing through your time, you know, from boot camp, and you got out as a sergeant. Do you want to talk about like maybe like how did your time in the Marine Corps influence like you as a leader? Maybe how you like problem solve, and just like how did you transform in those 4 or 5 years, exiting and going into the civilian world?
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely try to keep this part brief and kind of do like the takeaways. I think one thing is that, you know, comms is an interesting field because I learned an important lesson when I got to my first unit in Okinawa. People were either in like Korea or the Philippines or Afghanistan or a number of different places when I got there. And so kind of like the RBE people were there. And then everybody came back a couple months later. And long story short, what I learned in this specific MOS and community is that if you didn't want to put in the time and get really proficient at your job and be trusted to do your job properly and become a master in the MOS, basically, you're just going to SL3 gear, and you're going to pick up trash, and you're going to do grounds maintenance, and you're going to field day, And you know, I basically learned very quickly, like, hey man, like for kind of the first time in my life, I'm going to really put in all of my effort to doing this job as best as I can, because I don't want to do any of that stuff. I want to go do all these cool rotations to these other countries and stuff like that. And so I dialed in, and I think like the first thing I learned is that everything I thought I knew about what I'm capable of was kind of defied in a way. I never thought I was a big math kind of logic, like, you know, computer programming type of guy. And it really flipped that on its head for me. And then, you know, having junior Marines come in, having those like boot drops come in and telling these guys straight up, hey man, if you want to go down and, you know, do these, you know, cool operations that we get to do as Marines and be in the field and get attached to all these different units and do all this cool, fun stuff and do your job, focus and don't fuck around and follow the guys who are doing it the right way. But if you want to hang out and talk about how the Marine Corps is bullshit and how it's everybody else's fault and fucking, you know, pick up trash on base and never leave Okinawa and just go back to the States disgruntled and whatever, that door is open for you, man. But like, I wouldn't advise taking it. So I think a lot of my lessons were the hard skill set, the critical problem solving, the network engineering, working with encrypted networks. I did all the SWAN stuff all the way down to the local area stuff. I would go out and get attached to different units and help with their comms and kind of like, you know, there was all that. But then there was the kind of like, hey man, like having this chip on your shoulder about everything, like, is not going to get you that far. And the buck kind of stopped when I got to my first unit of being kind of like, a shithead about everything and kind of like a moody teenager, because they were like, cool dude, you could just, if you want to do that, you could just hang out here in the radio cage and fucking SL3, you know, 117 golfs all day. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that that's kind of like, if I had to distill it down, it's getting to mentor and lead the other guys, and then it's you know, learning that I'm more capable than I think I am if I actually apply myself, which sounds like kind of corny or whatever, but it's just true.
Yeah.
So
it's quite
yeah.
the 180 from like the, you know, the Scott that like, if you could ask like the MOI at Boulder, I'm sure that's probably not the way they would use freshman year Scott.
No.
Midshipman Turner was not that caliber. So
no. Yeah. And then when I'm getting out, I'm down at you know, I'm down at tracks at Pendleton, and, you know, I'm a platoon sergeant, and I get to go up to First Mar Div G6 and do this whole ANW2 incubator where we were basically helping figure out all the radio over data transmission. So like now when I see like pictures of these guys with like the tablets here, it's like I actually like helped, like, you know, do a lot of the groundwork for making stuff like that. You know, I mean, look, I didn't invent it or anything, but you know, I don't know. It's just, I got to see myself actually progress in something for the first time in my life. So it was pretty rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. And it sounds like kind of like it sounds like the advice you were giving your junior Marines, you were only giving it because it paid dividends for you. So I know we're glazing over it, but it sounds like, I know you've told me about it, you did get to go to a lot of cool exercises and get attached to cool units and do some cool stuff. So yeah, so it sounds like hopefully you kind of laid that foundation for the generations that came after.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Cool. So would love to talk about like now your transition, because I think it's probably right. I mean, I'm one of those, right? Like where the gut reaction, unless you're like, maybe like retirees are different, but I feel like for more like junior folks, you do 4 or 7 years or whatever, you got the post 9/11. Most people are like, let me just go to school, right? Can you like, since you didn't do that, can you talk about like why you didn't do that? I mean, you and then like ultimately you landed. You say like my first job was Peloton, and I'm sure people watching this will be like, wow, like that's great. How do you get a job at Peloton with no degree? But it was basically like a unknown startup at the time. So maybe you talk us through kind of like that transition period and how you landed at this unknown startup called Peloton.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So when I was getting out, I'm not going to act like I had some big plan because I didn't. I was like, man, I'm stoked to get out, stoked to be a normal 23-year-old dude again. Like, all those things that you take for granted when you're in the friendships, the consistency, the stuff that you get to do that you don't realize you're never going to get to do again. Like, that comes in your mind months or years later often. But like at the time I was like, all right, cool. Like I got a couple buddies from Boulder that I know that are moving to New York. I'm going to move in with them. So a funny part about my story is I got accepted into this sales engineering program for veterans at the time. And at the time they were guaranteeing different employment opportunities afterwards. And then in the time that I was accepted and before my cohorts started, they were like, hey, we're not guaranteeing anything anymore. And so I was like, man, I don't have the money to do this course, live in New York and not get paid, like do this course for whatever I think it was like 4 or 6 months. Like I don't have the money to do this basically.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I'm going to get on Indeed. I got some certs from the Marine Corps. I have experience. Let me apply to like 50 jobs, just that like click-a-thon. And
was your resume like, did you like focus a lot of like the data infrastructure and kind of like your experience? Like it was probably very tech heavy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I focused on all the like network engineering and just everything on the comm side that I did, which was super. It was relevant in the civilian world for sure.
Those
But
are the type of jobs you were applying to, like a tech like type.
Yeah.
Because this is like a key theme. I think this is like a key theme with like people, like folks getting out. Like you can get super, like you do have a lot of relevant transferable skills. I think the most general basic ones are like leadership, organization, right? Team, like,
right.
But in your case, you actually had a technical job in the Marine Corps, and you were applying, and you wanted to do something technical, so you actually like could get super deep, right? Versus like if you were trying to get like an operations job or something like that, you probably wouldn't be
right.
super technical, right? But you got to craft your resume to what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, I mean, I had this specific skill set. The Marine Corps experience definitely put me in a position to be able to do it. I think what's funny is like coming out of the Marine Corps, it's like I'm used to, I think you have to humble yourself a lot when you're looking at the civilian roles because they are not going to, especially when you're first getting out, when you're not used to working in the civilian world, they're not going to be the same thing as you were doing. Like, when I got out, it's like I'm a platoon sergeant. I'm in charge of all these dudes. I'm a authority in this knowledge space for my entire unit. Like my leadership, my battalion commander, all these people, they look to me and they go, hey man, like how are we going to orchestrate this so that everybody can talk, etc. And then you go and look at these, roles that you're applying for, and it's like, assist so-and-so with the, like whatever. And you're like, oh man, like, I used to, that's kind of the first time it starts to hit you that you're not in anymore, is like, oh man, I'm not like, I don't, like I used to kind of matter. And now I don't or whatever. But I tailored my resume for that. I'd done as good of a job as I could making it, in civilian terms. And I had a couple interviews. I had one with like Citadel, the financial institution, and a couple others. And there was this tech company, and they're like, hey, we don't have anybody to do our like back of house IT and like systems and network stuff. And then like, we don't even have somebody to like replace the keyboards when somebody spills coffee on them. Like we don't have somebody to do any of this stuff. And the guy on the phone that I interviewed with was really good at kind of convincing me to come on board. A lot of young people, whatever, like And so anyway, I never even went in for an in-person interview. I had one phone call on a Friday. It was about 15 minutes long, and I showed up to my first day of work on Monday.
Wow.
And initially going into it, I had no idea I accepted the job not even knowing what the company was. And then I Google it and I'm like, oh, it's like a spin studio. And so in my head, I'm like, oh, this is going to be like so skate and easy. Like I'm like doing IT for like a little spin studio. Like how many problems could they have? And so
it was like a global streaming service. Like,
yeah, I'd go in and like, I'm like, oh yeah, like cool. Like I'll just, I'll be doing some pretty easy stuff here. And then they're like, because they took me through the spin studio first and they're like showing me how they broadcast and all this stuff. And I'm like, all right, this is pretty cool. And then they're like, now we're going to go to where you work, the HQ. And I'm like, oh shit, there's an HQ. Because I was kind of trying to do like an easy gig here. I was like, maybe I will use my GI, like who knows?
Yeah.
And anyway, long story short is I get up there, there's like 100 people. I'm like, all right, like Marine Corps to bicycles, like this is kind of weird, but like let's do it. And I was thrown into the water, man. Like, and that's where like the resourcefulness that I learned in the Marines just kicked in immediately. I was like, there's no one here to help me. Like, there's no one, like, I'm the only one doing this. I don't know any of these people. And it reminded me a lot of like, when you're out on a field op and you're the only data guy, like there's no one that's going to help you debug your fucked up network. Like, the motor T chief is going to come by and be like, listen, you nerd fuck, figure it out, and kind of like smack you on the back of the head. But like, no one's here to help you. So like, I don't know, that mindset kicked in and I was working 6-7 days a week, 10+ hour day. I mean, I was working really, really hard, and that's what I knew how to do well. I was like, cool. I was like, this is what you guys learned at college. Like, let's do this. Like, I'll just put my head down and fucking work. And that's not to be like, oh, I'm smarter than everyone. It's not that at all. It's just, I started working there 8 weeks after EAS. So that's all I knew. All I knew was like mission accomplishment. Like I don't stop until the job is done kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. What was, I mean, you spoke a little bit to it, but I'm curious, like Christian, you probably worked at more startups. I've only worked at one for a brief, but it sounds like the classic vibe where the role on paper you get hired for is probably just like the tip of the iceberg. And really you have like 1,000 roles. But yeah, what was the vibe at like those early days? And maybe can you hit on like early days vibes and then over like how many years were you there total?
About 5.
Like maybe talking like kind of like responsibility growth you had.
Yeah, totally. So when I started there, the company was like 100 employees, and when I left, it was 8,000. So the scale was crazy, and I think we had just closed we were about to close, I think, a Series B when I started, and then we IPO'd at the end of September of 2019, and so I'd been there for like 3.5 years in that point, and it went from keep this thing alive, like that was my daily task, whether it's onboarding new employees or like, it's funny, our single sign-on platform, I won't get too into the weeds with this stuff, but like we had our single sign-on platform that we were just onboarding and basically like putting all our directories under. When the second week I was there, had a massive data breach. So it's like, I'm having to do this huge data migration and offboard all this stuff. I've never used any of these systems. I have no oversight whatsoever. No one's like managing me or paying attention or whatever. They're just kind of like, yeah, like,
the keys to everything.
Yeah. I'm the owner of our AWS instance, like all this stuff. And I'm kind of like, man, this is kind of crazy.
You're like a CTO that you have to like talk to, or?
Yeah, but nobody really, the thing that's beautiful about it is that it was just like being a comm Marine. No one cares what you're doing until it all breaks, right? Yeah. Do not expect a pat on the back for doing your job.
Unless you fuck up.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and you shouldn't get a pat on the back unless, for doing your job, frankly. I don't think that really serves people very well, but like, so basically the way that it worked is I was the first, IT hire like ever for Peloton. And then we started to grow. I could go into some pretty hilarious stories about transitioning like mentally from the Marine Corps to tech, because my first hire under me, I had to pull him into a phone room one time, and kind of the NCO came out and he quit 20 minutes later, and I was in a room with HR. Because I was like 6 months after I had gotten out, and I didn't know, that's how I knew how to manage people. It was like, hey man, do your fucking job or you're going to hear from me. And like, and I'm not here to treat you like a child. And he was like,
I'm out.
He bounced. Yeah. So I got a little slap on the wrist. But basically the way that it worked is I helped grow the IT and network and DevOps team. And then about 3 years in, I came to a fork in the road, and it was basically like, the company was growing rapidly, and it was, I can keep going down this technical route, or I can pivot. There's an opportunity from another leader in the company that's been extended to me, where they want me to basically run the launch of the new Peloton streaming studio. And they basically said, hey, we're giving you this opportunity. You can leave your current team. You can be an individual contributor, and you can basically run this very large, $50 million initiative, basically, because you've been at the company for a long time. We trust you. We know that you can learn fast, and we don't want to do an outside hire for this particular role. And I mean, it was great. The recognition was great. It always feels good to like get a promotion or an opportunity like that. And I took it, and it was, again, like thrown into the water again and starting all over. I know how to work with people. I know how to kind of do pseudo program management, but I've never been in charge of, marketing, engineering, construction, streaming, all like reporting their work streams into me, and then me being the person who communicates everything to the executive level and the CEO and all this stuff. And so I was in the hot seat for sure, in a good way. But yeah, it was crazy. I worked on this entire project for the last about 2 years that I was there. We IPO'd.
Yeah, I remember in New York, you telling me like, like, dude, it's crazy. Like you were literally hiring people where like MBA was required for the role.
Yeah. It got interesting. And it was kind of like, it was one of those things where I just happened to get my foot in the door at this company and build rapport and build relationships and trust. And that's, and then working really hard and proving that I can be someone who's trusted. Not that I didn't have plenty of fuck ups. I almost brought down our entire email server from my house when I had strep throat at one point, and a bunch of stuff like that. So like, I did not do anything even close to perfect. But yeah, like I think the major lessons were kind of like just having that confidence in myself to at least give it a shot, right? Like, why not? The worst thing that happens is I figure out that this program management type stuff is not for me, and I go back to being an engineer. And it's kind of like the same mindset with, hey, let me give this Peloton thing a shot, and if it doesn't work out, I can use my GI Bill and go back to school. Like,
or go to Boulder, and worst case, you can enlist.
Yeah, it's like the stakes are only as high as I want to make it, and I constantly need to like lower my ego. My ego is the thing that's going to get in the way of being able to move forward and kind of do it without this intense fear of failure, which is like inevitable anyways, right? Like you're going to fail anyways. And it usually feels like this huge deal to you, and everybody else just kind of like, the amount of mental energy you can waste fixating on like, what did everybody think about that presentation? I don't think I did as well as I should have, rather than just being like, hey, I did my best, and like if I get negative feedback, then I can like adjust and correct it and move forward. Or they're going to tell me I'm not good enough for this role. Like if that's the worst thing that can happen, like I'm cool with it. So anyway, not to go on a tangent.
Yeah,
but
yeah. I mean, I know like we've shared many stories over beer about the early days of Peloton. We could probably talk for hours about it. Maybe to close out this kind of chapter of your story, what advice would you give a veteran who's like looking to join an early stage startup? Like even like, do you think it's good for vets, and just like what like somebody's doing it? What's your 30-second pitch to them?
I would say it's tough because there is a lack of structure that is a little bit disorienting. But I think that if that's something that you're seeking out, and you're seeking out, you know, uncertainty basically, and you're okay with that, then go for it. Because like your role, the company, none of it might work out, and like don't have the expectation that it will work out. Go in from like a personal development perspective, in my opinion. Hey, I'm here to like challenge and develop myself. I'm not in the results game here, because if I get into the results game here, I'm going to drive myself kind of crazy. So that would be my thing. And then also just a plug for like, if you're getting out, man, like try to stay connected to other veterans. That's what's so great about what you guys are doing. I kind of like didn't talk to anybody for like a year, and then it gets lonely, right? You don't realize like what you had. So at a smaller startup, you're not going to have a lot of these veteran organizations. That's like why I started the Veterans at Peloton thing, because it was like, and I'll make this short, but I'm like walking across the office one day, and there's this guy that I kind of know. He's like my buddy. And like all of a sudden I've seen this like 0351 tattoo on his arm. And I'm like, there's no way that guy was at 0351. Like he doesn't, you know, like maybe it's like his area code or something, like whatever. And then one day I'm just like, hey dude, is that a 0351 tattoo? And he's like, oh yeah, I was with 1-5, like blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, no shit. And then put out on the Slack channel, turns out there's like 20 vets that work at the company, and none of us had any idea. So anyway, just a plug for that. Stay connected with these guys.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cool. Well, I definitely want to get to like your founder experience, but
before we move on, I actually kind of wanted to like add one thing that I thought was really interesting. Just coming from the startup world, Scott, you started with this, but you were like, I basically had a really good work ethic coming out of the Marine Corps, and I was really resourceful, and kind of those two building blocks or just attributes took you so far. And I think that's like the key to startups, which is like in the absence of that hierarchy, you can get so far just by outworking the next guy, by like figuring out the answers to problems on your own, and then just being really adaptable, right? Like it's not so structured where it's like you have one person for every role and like this kind of nice round hole for this round peg. It's like you have one guy and you probably had to wear 5 or 6 different hats, and you're like, I don't know the answers to all these, but I'm willing to figure it out. And if that requires like, you know, working the weekends, so be it. That type of mentality goes so far in startups. And I feel like that's a really great way. Like I've seen like veterans that I've worked with just like skyrocket their careers because people really respect that, and you can just learn so much. Like you can come up the learning curve so fast when you just have that type of mentality. And when you happen to land, this is where you need a little bit of luck. But when you happen to land at a company like Peloton that's scaling like almost exponentially, you get first dibs at like the bigger responsibility, you know? Yeah. And so you can grow proportionally to the growth of the company, which could be just like a crazy rate of growth. So I thought that was like really insightful, that I thought was worth emphasizing after listening to this whole like stint about Peloton. And I think it would be valuable for other people to think about too, because I feel like most vets are like, oh, well, I want to go work in, you know, investment banking, or it's some big firm. Before we move on to Peloton, off Peloton though, I gotta ask, like, how was that IPO party? I feel like it's so special. It's so special to be at a company that IPOs. It's like a once in a career kind of thing if you're lucky in this field. So like we need to hit on that.
Yeah, was there an IPO rager? Like everybody's just like high-fiving that they're millionaires?
Yeah, it was that was a really special time.
And you got it luckily right before COVID.
Yeah, it was surreal. It's funny when you're, for me at least, like working at the company and having been like an older whatever employee at the company, or having been there for a lot longer than a lot of people, it was kind of just like, all right, like now we got to worry about the stock, but like it's a celebration, but it's also like, okay, because like I did so much SOX readiness and working with these auditors and material systems auditing and like directory merging and like cleaning up all this nasty back end stuff that you have to do, where you really like everything has to be pretty squeaky clean on like especially like an identity management side. But yeah, man, I mean, it was awesome, and it feels good to like celebrate the company and what we were working towards. And then honestly, like it was kind of like cool, back to work the next day, like because it's like, okay, well, this as you can see from what happened with the company's stock, like it can go down pretty quick, so like you better work.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I don't think we have time to go into the, like, there's probably a second, we can probably do a follow-up and go deeper, but also like crazy COVID time and the stock going through the roof and then going to freaking zero. It's like,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you got out at a good time and moved on, and not only did you learn a lot, but I feel like you personally benefited financially, personally, gave you a lot of freedom to explore your
definitely.
So yeah, thanks for walking us through that. So before we get into your current stage of being a co-founder, those couple other companies, you're kind of stepping stone between Peloton and founding Misery Mayhem. You probably had to pivot, maybe like interviewing again and kind of figure out what your next move was. It seems like there were more stepping stones to like ultimately wanting to be an entrepreneur. So what was that kind of like collectively, that phase of your professional journey like?
I really enjoyed it, honestly. I kind of felt after a while, I left Peloton pretty much at the height of the company. I left in January of 2021. And I was like, hey, I've had a great time here. I've learned so much. It's kind of funny, like your brain gets programmed a little bit to do things in like chunks of 4 or 5 years, or at least it was then for me, not so much anymore. But I was like, this is the only job I've had. This is the only place I've worked. I'm 27 now. Like, I've been out of the Marine Corps for 5 years. Like, why don't I go try something else? And then also COVID was like, I'd moved back to California, and there was always this kind of like, oh, we're going to return to work in New York. And that felt kind of like icky, being like, because I had no intention of returning to New York at the time. And it just felt weird, like not being fully honest for those couple of months, being like, oh yeah, like if I need to come back, I'll come back. But then being like, I don't know if I'm going to come back. So, no, I mean, I just wanted to try something else out. And so, in terms of a company, so I ended up going to a B2B SaaS company, and doing, and like working in more of a sales to implementation org, and then helping engineering get all the product feedback to, build new features and stuff like that. And being on customer calls all the time, and like doing this customer facing kind of sales, engineering, program management, like hybrid role. And then with that company, it was one of those things where very small company, my role kind of became that catch-all, and I knew where that went. It just went to piling it on. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go back to consumer tech, and work like R&D, hardware, software pipeline to then distribution, and kind of doing that whole like life cycle of, hey, here's the idea, work with the engineers to build it, test it, and then actually I was managing our relationships with like our factories in Taiwan and stuff like that, and then actually getting it on shelf on a, and another 100-person company. So I got to see kind of this full life cycle of the product. So it was actually really great. I felt like each stop there educated me on a very different part of the business that I didn't get exposed to at the previous ones.
How did you hop around? Was it just like applying online? Did you have to network? Like how'd you find those roles?
These were all cold. So the first one, it was the job market at the beginning of 2021 in tech was like booming. And it was kind of like, hey, I just came off this like successful company, kind of like, I have a lot of opportunities. I have different people coming in with different offers. Like, why don't I do what's, for me, it was, again, like, I've never worked in B2B. I lived with B2B sales guys in New York for all 4 years. Like, I kind of wanted to like, hey, like, what does working in this kind of environment look like? I want some exposure. And then Hatch, the third company, I've been using one of their products for a couple of years, and I saw that they were hiring, and I was like, cool, consumer tech, like, let's go. That sounds great.
Actually,
yeah.
um,
But yeah, it was just cold applications though. And you know, that can be everybody knows that, kind of, not everybody, but like it can be a monotonous game. I would recommend that people are very, very focused and don't apply to 20 jobs at once. Apply to 5 and do the research and like really try to like get a good cover letter, maybe talk to some people who have worked there, like, you know, get excited about working at the company, because after the first 2 months, the whole, oh, this is easy and great, like, it's going to go away and it's going to become work. So like, you know, make sure that you're putting yourself in the right position there, because very quickly that feeling of relief can go away after you've left your previous role that you were kind of burned out on or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. So now you're at Hatch. I mean, I don't know, like on a personal level, you kind of found this like new passion for like triathlons and Ironmans, and you know, you start sending me pictures of you doing crazy shit, right? I'm sure that that maybe had a little bit to do with like this idea for like a fitness oatmeal brand. But you want to talk Hatch to like like how you ended up starting this company?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually was going to start this company right after I left Peloton initially. Or I'd like had the idea of it. And then, you know, it's a lot.
Like fitness enthusiast?
Yeah, like, I mean, so basically the origin story is my co-founder and my co-founder was one of the content strategy leaders at Peloton. And we had become personal friends working out in the same gym in New York together. And it's like this dungeon gym, this like no frills, like pretty disgusting, honestly. It was like kind of the opposite of Equinox. It was like a lot of juice heads. And anyway, I'm in there and I'm working out and I'm like, we're in the office and I'm like, hey man, you should come, you know, hit a workout with me. He was like, oh, I'm trying to get back into shape, whatever. We go in there and I know this trainer in there, and the guy is like total nut job, just did 25 years in New York State prison for murder, you know, completely shaved, tattooed all over. And he's like, hey, let me fucking train you guys. And I'm like, I don't need a trainer. Like, I don't really, whatever. And anyway, we end up agreeing to doing a couple training sessions. We both end up getting trained by the guy for like well over a year. He transformed my co-founder completely. And then, you know, it was really like mixing whey protein in with my oatmeal was like my everyday meal, as it is for a lot of people. And then like I'm at Hatch, I'm getting into ultra marathon running. I'm getting into triathlon. I'm getting into all this stuff, and I'm doing this really high volume ultra marathon training, and doing like multiple races and all this stuff. And I'm just hammering this meal still. And I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, you got like Quaker and Kodiak that are like full of sugar, you know, and then like these other like, those are kind of the only big brands that are giving you any protein on me. Like, this seems very obvious. And so I went to my buddy and I was like, hey man, I did some market research here and whatever. And, you know, this seems like a very sleepy, stagnant category where these other brands, like Goodles, I don't know if you know that one. They're like the mac and cheese company, or, you know, there's a bunch of these kind of better for you brands that are more popular in the last few years. And I was just like, do you want to go in on this thing with me? And we were still both working our full-time jobs. And then, you know, anyway, I could go into the whole thing, but basically started building the company, and then came to a point where I was like, I'm working at Hatch. I'm doing this on the side. if I keep doing both of these, I'm going to fail at both. I have the autonomy right now to go after this. I don't want to ask what ifs. I want to try it. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay. But I want to try it. So, we raised some money last year, and I was telling Sebastian before the call, we're actually doing a rebrand right now. Whole nother thing there, where it's like you can go in with all these ideas of what makes CPG brand work, but you got to learn the rules of any given industry before you decide you want to break them. And so we've learned a lot very quickly, and we're making some pivots and adjustments. But it's been amazing. And yeah, I mean, I'm like super grateful to even be able to do it, frankly. But it's just the same exact thing. It's like, hey man, like I can either focus and be super outcome focused. And the reason I'm doing this is like to get, an M&A done in the next 5 to 7 years and blah, 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 blah. And like, all that would be great. Yeah, like for sure. But like, I just want to see if I can do this, basically. And if I can't, that's fine. I'll try it again in 10 years, hopefully. So, yeah, that's kind of I could go, I mean, I don't know what else you want to know, but that's, without getting into a bunch of detail, that's kind of the long and the short of it.
Yeah, well, congrats on raising money. I'd love to hear.
Hard.
I'm sure that was wild. I'm sure you probably got a lot of no's before you got a yes. So you want to talk us through kind of the challenge for those like non-familiar with raising capital as a startup. Can you talk us through some of the challenges and lessons you learned, and ultimately kind of got the yes finally?
Yeah, it's and I'll say that like once you're on the fundraising treadmill, you don't get off. So I'm fundraising right now, basically too. But but granted, it's not as crazy as it was last year, but it's about to be in like 2 months. But with fundraising, I mean, especially with the stage and the specific industry, like studying your industry and exactly what qualifies you, basically the right to have a certain amount of money for your organization is number one. Tech is very different than consumer, especially consumer packaged goods. Product market fit and actually having some velocity and actually proving out sales and things like that are a prerequisite in the industry that I'm in. Like they don't want to see a great idea that you think is going to work. They want to say, do you have customers and are you retaining them? And at what rate are you retaining them? And what's your consumer acquisition cost? And like all of the metrics are very relevant up front. I've never raised for a tech company. I think everybody has the idea that whatever industry you're not in is easier than yours to raise money or to build, right? Like I would not want to build a tech company. I've worked at a few of them, and God bless. But like it's a lot. But at the same time, a lot of tech companies, having worked in tech companies, I came in with this preconceived notion that, well, if I just have a good idea that people relate to, I can probably get some money. And that's just not the case. So it very quickly became tactical. And how do I prove my thesis to the point where I'm not driving my business into too much debt that it becomes unappealing, but I'm also showing that there is real stickiness in what I'm doing to merit that investment. And it's kind of like a lot of other things. I think more than my job hunts and stuff like that, the fundraising has been about networking. It's been about this person might believe in you, but you don't meet their requirements, so they're going to pass you off to the next guy. And you talk to endless amounts of people. Most of them tune out after about 3 minutes, and 99.9% of them say no. And it's pretty easy to get feeling down when it's like, hey man, like it's been 7 months and we haven't raised a dime. and I haven't gotten paid in 7 months or whatever it is, right? Like I have a 6-month-old son. I have a house, I have a mortgage. Like, what am I doing? And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, like all those things are going to come up, and I'm willing to see this thing through to where either it succeeds or it no longer makes sense for me to do it. But yeah, man, I mean, the fundraising it's an endurance race. Honestly, it's like the ultra marathon running. It's like you're going to go through these weird ups and downs and want to quit and like, just roll over on the floor or whatever. But it sounds corny, but it's like you just kind of have to keep doing it. And that's all there is to it. So that's my I don't know if that was like helpful.
Yeah, that's, I know. I see. I know we're coming up on time here, so maybe we'll do some more like reflection type questions to close out. Like, I feel like a key part of your story is like reinvention. Like you reinvented yourself multiple times, whether you accidentally got put in another role or you pursued something. A lot of context switching. Like, what's been consistent about like your habits or your mindset? Maybe like lessons from the Marine Corps. It doesn't have to be, but like kind of like what's your consistency been throughout that?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. I think that the less I'm focused on outcomes and the less I'm like the more I'm kind of like training my ego to step away from things, the better I feel and the better I operate in whatever environment I'm in. If I'm obsessing over outcomes, I just shoot myself in the foot. And I just get emotional about it, and it turns into this kind of self-sabotaging thing. And that's, those are habits that I've kind of, I've done a lot of work in trying to get out, but they're always going to be there to an extent, right? But I think it's just kind of, it's like being upfront and honest with myself first, and then about the situation. And like, what am I really trying to do here? Do I want to go around and tell a bunch of people that I did X, Y, and Z? Or like, where is this coming from? Is this coming from a genuine place? And am I actually trying to like show up for other people and like benefit whatever organization I'm in? Or am I in this just to like feel good about me and be able to, tell other people how well I'm doing or whatever. So, I think that's kind of the biggest thing. And that took a long time to get to, like, especially early on in my career. Like I was just so obsessed with getting validation all the time. And having a chip on my shoulder and being like, yeah, well, I didn't go to college, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, dude, like, it's fine, man. Like, you don't have anything to prove. Like, if you're coming at something with honesty and integrity and you're trying to solve a problem, then it's probably valid and you're probably in the right place. But if you're confused about why you're doing something and you're kind of chasing this, like, you're like a moth to the flame in your career or in your personal life or basically anything, it's like, that's when I'm in trouble. So it's like, yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is learning how to be honest with myself through the whole process and actually like have a real conversation with like, what am I trying to do right now? What is the reason behind it? So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
that's a definitely a good lesson to learn. I'm glad you're able to kind of center yourself that way now. So maybe like one last one, like, what would you tell like for the vets watching this, maybe like those in Alpha Tribe who are getting out and they're really like unsure where to start. Like, should I go to school? Do I just apply to a job, trade school, whatever the case may be? Like what's your advice to somebody who's just kind of like not sure where to
go? Yeah, not everything is a final decision. Start doing something. If you figure out you're not in love with it, you can pivot, right? Like, and it's like circumstances are circumstances, right? You got to be able to pay your rent and feed yourself and all this stuff. So like those are going to come first, but like above that, it's just like, yeah, man, like if everything feels so serious, especially like when you're getting out of the Marine Corps and stuff like that. I was like, man, okay, like this is what I'm doing. Like, shit, do I really want to do this? And it's like, take a deep breath. Like, it's going to be fine. like just start doing something. If you figure out it's not for you, you can pivot, and just be honest with other people, be open with other people. Hey man, I'm not doing too great. I'm not happy in my career. You know, like you don't even have to ask, can you help me all the time? It can just be like opening your mouth and saying something. Because I think it's like, yeah, the more you push that stuff down, you get resentment, stuff like that. It can really be poisonous to like who you are as a person. So yeah, don't feel like you're going down this prescribed path or this road with so much like finality. Like you can move around, you can try different shit, and if it doesn't work out, you'll be all right. So yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I know I had a similar mindset, and when first job out of school, I was like, I don't like this at all. I think 6 months in, I was already planning my exit. Other people are telling me, no, you got to work at a company for a few years or else it looks bad in your resume. I'm like, no, don't. Went to another place, didn't like that place either. Like after 8 months, I left, and now, I've been somewhere for over 3 years now. I'm saying it's my forever home, but it made me like feel good that like, I was right to like not just accept that and be miserable for a few years just because people are telling me to. Like I was like in my mind, I'm like, this can't be it. There has to be somewhere else that I fit in more.
Right.
So yeah, good stuff, Scott.
100%.
Appreciate you giving us the time today.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Pleasure.
We're definitely going to take you up and come to Tahoe and hang out on the boat.
Yeah, dude. Do it.
Maybe we'll make it happen this summer.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, dude. Well,
Awesome.
thanks again.
Yeah, guys.